Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Craig Cairns. How's it going, Craig?
Very well, Joel. Spring in the air, weekend off. Can't really complain.
Yes, we were discussing that. So it's more so you than me, just because I'm trying to get things sorted before I go on holiday. So it doesn't bother me, but it's nice to have I was going to say footballless weekend, but you are actually heading to football tomorrow. But it's nice to have a workless weekend and not have to worry about any of that.
Yeah, Scotland on Sunday as well, isn't it? So,
Of course.
week. Is it Sunday?
Sunday night, yeah. Well, 5 p.m.
So it will still be a fairly footballing weekend. Looking out to see if James Wilson breaks the record and gets his debut. You can understand why he didn't come on against Greece last night, because Scotland were getting absolutely pummeled. So to throw him on would have been a bit expecting a bit much, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's if we were 3-0 up or something, then it would be nice to bring him on. So hopefully on Sunday it might be the case that he is able to get a bit of action, get a cap, and be secured to Scotland. We are here not to talk about Scotland. We're here to discuss everything, anything HMFC. We've had loads of questions in over social media. We just thought we'd do a Q&A. There was a lot of really good questions. And if you're watching just now, feel free to fire a question in the chat if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube. If it doesn't allow you, it just means you need to subscribe. And after like a minute, I don't know if I've still done that. But anyway, if you subscribe, then you're able to fire in a question. Now, before we get into it, Heart Standard is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. Start your search today. So as I said, we've got loads of questions. There'll be a few that we might not get around to. There's a few that are worthy of a show in itself, which we'll get around to. And then I might try and, if I get time over the weekend, put this into an article as well. So just like a kind of Q&A article and provide brief but hopefully coherent answers to what we've been asked. Now, we'll just jump straight in. And I suppose the big one will be, actually 2 seconds. I'll just get the people who asked the question because it'd be rude of me not to. Scott Henderson asked on Twitter, absolutely anything on Bloom, spring or summer, percentages of stakes, how much of an input do you think he'll want to get? And Bobby McBobbin asked, will we have sufficient funds for summer recruitment plans to get the quality of player Jamestown identifies, assuming Tony Bloom investment has not happened at this point? So just on Bloom, because I know there was an article floating about around his potential investment. I don't know anything around like stakes or specifics around money and how much it translates to on the pitch, etc. Again, these things will be quite guarded. I do know that there is discussions are still happening. I know there were discussions before the new year, after the new year, and it was kind of hoped that there'd be agreement and announcement, I think, early in the year, certainly springtime, but that's not quite happened because with all these things, there's so many different aspects involved, and it's never going to be straightforward, especially with just the way that like football works and the complexities of the deal. But I've spoken to some people confident that it will be sorted by the end of the season, perhaps even next month. But there's no, I can't say definitives if X is going to happen or Y is going to happen. But I could say that I'm pretty confident that an agreement, an announcement, etc., will happen before the start of the end of the season, which is positive. And again, that will have an impact on. Likely have an impact on what happens over the summer. But in terms of like input, do you think he'll want and get? I think because he's got
that would be arm's length, won't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly that. He's got a number of he's got his fingers in a number of different pies. So Union Saint-Gilloise, you've got Brighton, you've got the Melbourne Victory, and then his other businesses. So he's not going to be he's not going to be at Tynecastle every day or every week, but he will be probably involved as much as he needs to be. But I don't think he'll be hands on, and like you said, it'll be pretty at arm's length.
But Jamestown is involved. It's like
Yes.
he's involved at arm's length through Jamestown, and they, again, there might not be somebody at the club dictating, but there's an agreement to use the software and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's
like to do with that rather than getting any sort of control of the club or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not going to be involved in Hearts' everyday business, which it's going to be at a distance, and then and then Jamestown obviously much more involved with recruitment. In terms of, I don't think we'll see significant. I don't think we can expect to have number of players being signed for high 6-figure deals or even 7-figure deals in terms of breaking the transfer record that we have. And then it's also important to work within the budgets that the club have. And I think it'll be a gradual increase, because the aim is to break the Old Firm duopoly and challenge at the top of the league. And for that, there needs to obviously be savvy recruitment via Jamestown, but also to make a big jump, there will need to be increased investment. But I don't think that'll just immediately happen in the summer. I think that'll be a gradual thing.
I don't know if you included the question, but somebody asked on Twitter about whether there'd be sufficient funds in the summer to spend, basically.
Yeah, I read out.
Oh, you did read that out? Okay,
yeah.
So was that in the 3 that you just kind of mentioned?
Yeah.
Right, sorry. So in response to that then, I think there's a few different factors there. I think there will be a clear out of sorts in the summer. So there will be wages freed up purely by players out of contract. Some of those are on decent wages that aren't getting any game time whatsoever at the moment. There'll be others that are contracted next season that I think will go as well. I think players like Oda will probably go. There's money from this season. There's a trip to Hamlin coming up. The European group stage would have brought in a decent amount of money. And there was, probably pales in comparison to the European money, but there was a wee bit of profit made in January as well, and maybe future profits as well, depending on performance and sell-ons and all these kind of things. And then there'll just be the usual budget. Hearts have a decent budget going into any season, which is better than most of the other clubs in the division. So I think all those factors would mean that even without, I don't know, for want of a better way of putting it, Tony Bloom money or external investment, I think the last year at Hearts has been quite profitable, it would seem.
Yeah, and the fact that you mentioned players outgoing leads me on to, I'm going to jump around here, leads me on to the next question from Tron Halstvet, and he asks, who are the dead certs to be gone in the summer regardless of contract status? And Jason 91 asks, go through the squad and do a keep and stay. I'm guessing that means keep and go. That second question is very much a podcast or a show in itself. But in terms of the dead certs, where the Tron Halsfit asks, regardless of contract status, that's really hard to say, because in terms of, you can't, for example, Yutaro Oda will be someone who the club will, who's not featuring in the plans, but you can't say for certain that he'll go in the summer because he is under contract. So that requires you're either paying him off, which I don't think the club would want to do, or you need interest in him. So
and there was some in January, and you imagine it'd be easier to do in the summer as well. So I was going. I have a maybe slightly controversial one. Maybe not quite dead cert, but I'm starting to wonder how long James Wilson is going to be at Hearts now.
So there's another question on that, so we'll get to that one.
Right, okay. Apologies. I did look about, I don't know, an hour or two ago at questions and thought of answers for some of them, but I didn't quite look through the whole list that you had sent to me, so apologies for...
So we'll come to James Wilson, but the only dead cert is Barry Mackay, and then on the level below them, I would class George Grant and Lauren Shankland as likely ones to depart. So yeah, those you mentioned about wages, those three I would say are in the higher bracket of wages that the club pay out. So that kind of frees them up. So I think those three, Oda, and then others you could speculate about. I think the rest, whether it's the kind of Jan Danda or maybe Alan Forrest or whoever.
So you might find that they might try to sell Danda but aren't able to, for instance, and then he goes on loan at the start of next season or something like that. I think that's a possible scenario for Danda. If they aren't able to, he might just want to go because he's clearly not part of Critchley's plans. I know he's had a wee bit of an injury recently, but even before that, he was used fairly sparingly. And what about Forrest? I just can't make up my mind about Forrest. I just wonder whether he'll just keep him as a squad player. He seems to like something about Forrest.
Yeah, I would. I think he's as you said, he's just a player that I think managers are always going to like. So, and again, just wider point, I think who goes out will determine how many come in. So the big thing is Hearts we can't go into next season with the same size squad. I think it's unmanageable, and it's about streamlining it, and then that's that way it's easier for younger players to get minutes, and also if you're not paying out so much for so many players, you can recruit say better quality players rather than bringing in 4 or 5, like 5 or 6. You can bring in 3 or 4, etc. Just staying on transfers, because I've seen a few coming in on the chat there. You mentioned James Wilson, and that was one of the questions. Is who was it that asked? Can I find it? Oh yes, it was Scott Henderson. Do you think we'll get Wilson on a long-term deal? So you mentioned.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I thought you were done. I was just going to say, I think both actually. I think he will sign a new deal before he leaves. I think that will almost definitely happen. I'm just starting to wonder, just slightly, trolling's not the right word, but certainly just sort of more just putting it out there rather than I actually think this. But you've got to wonder about the next transfer window, and him being called up to the Scotland squad and playing regularly for Hearts, being one of the top scorers, I think that's going to alert a lot of people. And there has been notably a lot of, younger players that are even further behind in their development of James Wilson mostly, but there's been a sort of slight hoovering up of young Scottish players from England in recent times. Post-Brexit, so you wonder whether James Wilson is somebody that teams are going to look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because the teams were looking at him. Before he signed his professional deal, and now he's actually played. He's nearly played 30 competitive games, and he
falls into a slightly different bracket now, is what I'm trying to say. Whereas they were signing those young players for their... So say they had signed James Wilson then, they're signing James Wilson for their academy. Whereas now they're signing James Wilson, but James Wilson's in the Scotland squad. That might not... He might not be in a few future Scotland squads before if he ever becomes a regular. Don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. But he likely for his next transfer definitely is for his next transfer is in a completely different personal situation for what he wants from his next move rather than moving to an English academy. So he's now in a completely different bracket as well.
Exactly. He's not going to move somewhere to play Premier League football, Premier League 2 football or under 23 football. He's talked about wanting to play competitive football, and that's one of the key reasons he stayed at Hearts when he had all this opportunity down south for big clubs. in terms of the long-term deal, Hearts, of course, want to sign him on a long-term deal. But I think there's so much. James Wilson is in a fantastic position for him, for himself, because he's got a year left on his deal, and he, on a personal level, he doesn't need to go and sign a new deal, because he could look at it and go, right, I've got another stay at Hearts for another 12 months and play another 40 competitive games, and then by the end of next season he could have played 100 competitive games, and that's kind of always seen as the barometer, and then to move on, and then if on a free he would have the pick of so many clubs. And so that's why I think it's important that Hearts do their damnedest to try even extend them for a further year, and then when it comes to selling them, even if you're taking a smaller transfer fee than you'd necessarily want, it's important to have a sell-on clause, because you look at the potential that he has, and you also look at one thing I think is important is his agency, is PLG, and they don't sign up everyone and anyone. For example, they've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Andrew Robertson, Aaron Hickey, Ryan Christie. So they've got a lot of high-profile guys, Stuart Armstrong, David Turnbull, who played, obviously high-profile guys, and then there's guys who've played in Scotland, played a good amount in Scotland before moving on. So I think that was always important for him to play a lot of competitive football. So yeah, I think there might be a decision made in the summer for Hearts, whether if they don't get this feeling that he would sign an extension, then you do have to consider, right, this is a guy who we've produced. If we need to get some money off from, again, even if we just sell him for a relatively low fee but have a release clause on, then you're kind of protecting your asset in like the future, even though he's not going to be here. So yeah, and or even as Ember Craig says, Wilson seems like a good candidate for a sale and loan back type deal. Again, I think that would be attractive to potential suitors who think, right, he's not ready for us now, but if we can convince him that in a year or 18 months' time that he will be part of our first team plans, then sign him and loan him back. Personally, I would like to see him go abroad, but I mean I would say that about every player.
It's very he's a ready-made Shea Adams replacement, maybe domestically and international. I just to add to what you said about being in a really good situation, he also seems really switched on, and he also doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's going to have pound signs in his eyes and want to jump ahead, and he realizes that his progression's a steady one. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's getting ahead of himself in any kind of way. So yes, I think that one way or another, 12 more months at Hearts will be a very feasible option for him, because he's playing regularly. Critchley likes him. Critchley's managing him and using him well. You've heard about both Critchley and Wilson talk about the individual coaching that he's getting and things like that. So yes, it would be a very good option for him to still be at Hearts next season. I just wonder with the money kicking about and all that kind of stuff. And like I say, the post-Brexit transfer market, it's very possible that an English team will do what they can to get him in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be, I mean, one that could tick all the boxes is just a 12-month extension on increased wage, and you're getting him for 12. He plays another year of football. You've still got a year left, so you can sell him for a decent amount. And as you and
what those conditions are for the sale and things like that.
And Ewan Kensington, as he notes, would receive a development fee if he allowed his contract to run down, but of course not anywhere near the transfer fee could be. Another one,
potentially.
And then another one has a few people are asking about. So Jason messaged in on Twitter. Apparently, a lot of clubs sniffing around Penrice. What kind of fee do you think Hearts should be looking for? And then there's a couple others. Ewan Mackenzie asked, with the interest in Penrice, could we see him moving on? And Grant McLean says Penrice could go. So yeah, on Penrice, I just think it's clubs would be daft not to be looking at him after the impact he's had at Hearts and the profile he has. There'll be a second part of an interview with James Penrice coming out next week, and he talked about asked him about his pace and his stamina. He was like, his pace, he didn't always have that. He did a lot of work on his physique or his nutrition, lost a bit of weight, and that allowed him to be even quicker. And Hearts are in a good position to allow Penrice. If he's came in from Livingston, done excellently for 12 months, and then there's opportunity for him to move on for a significant profit, then Hearts have got a replacement waiting in the wings in Harry Milne. I've spoken to a couple of his ex-managers for another piece at some point, and both were off the view, certainly one was off the view that there'd be no issue Milne stepping in and replacing Penrice. And you add in the fact that he is, understand he is very highly rated by Jamestown.
The Penrice, in terms of like the fee, I don't really know. That's all really difficult because it really depends on circumstance. It depends on when we're talking. I'm talking the summer or a January. How long's left of his contract? I think he'll probably sign a new deal before the end of the season or in the summer, given his appearances.
I think he's still got 2 years left in his deal. So.
But still, I don't know. I think if maybe not before the end of the season then, because I don't think they're really in the mood to do anything before the end of the season with anybody. But do you not think if there is interest, they would then try and give him another deal? That you just sell him?
I think if there's sufficient interest, I think they wouldn't. I think it would be different if he had 1 year left on his deal. Whereas I think with 2 years, I think you're quite comfortable, and it's one of those where you'd maybe look at it with 18 months on his deal. I think that's where the decision comes, whether you look to sell him after 18 months or give him an extension when it's 2 years. I think it's quite comfortable, and you can still get good value if teams come in the summer. Fair enough. Again, I don't know. I don't know about price. I don't know about cost. I know that.
I don't know about contract either. I'm just having a guess. I just thought because he'd come in not to be one of the first names on the team sheet and he's made himself one of the first names on the team sheet, and because there's potential interest, there's a potential Scotland call at one point down the future as well. So I don't know. I mean, we speak about players like I know that the model is that if somebody comes in with the market price or the what the club values the player at or what they're looking for, then you sell and then you invest in the next player. But then you get transfers such as McCart and we think Khartoum that they're more just to kind of like they're to see out their deal and to be there. And with Penrice, I don't know. I mean, what exactly is Penrice's ceiling, and which category does Penrice fall into? I mean, I don't know. I'd like to think that he's more of a longer term player at Hearts rather than him moving on. I mean, what kind of club do you think he would move to?
I think he
Rangers.
Would. Yeah,
Bloody Rangers.
I think English Championship clubs would look at him and their eyes would light up because of his stamina, his ability to get up and down the flank. He's versatile as well. He can play left back, he can play left wing back, he can play left wing. He's played centre mid in his past, he's played right wing in his past. So I think the only position he's not really played is striker and centre back. So yeah, I think age-wise, I think he's now at an age where he could class him as a late developer, or he's grown later on in his career. And
he certainly gets confused with a young player enough to back that up.
But I do think I think he's got more. I think he's got more to get to, and I think it would be. I still think he's someone that you could get good value from, and he would be looking at he'll be looking at his career and thinking, because of where he's came from, that Hearts shouldn't be his end point, and that's a good thing. I'm saying that's a good thing for him, because you want players who see Hearts come in and think, if I do well here, it can open up loads of doors for me. So yeah, he will be an interesting one, but I thoroughly expect that there'll be interest come the summer, and he could be one that's sold should a sufficient offer come in. Kev Mack asks, any truth in Alfie Osborne to Brighton? Not first I've heard if it was this morning, but I wouldn't be surprised if, again, another one where teams are looking at him because he's very, very highly rated and
that's
doing well.
Exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about, or talking about earlier, about academy players getting hoovered up by English academies.
Yeah, exactly. So he is, again, a very good profile of player, and versatility, stature.
Very tall, yeah.
Yeah, very tall, yeah. He's imposing presence. Just a couple of quick fire questions before we move on to other ones. Andrew Cisco 0909 on Twitter asked, what's the update on McCart's injury? I wasn't at the last game, so are you able to, or the last presser, can you give our update on what Critchley said?
The last presser, they said, similar to Devlin, in that I know that Devlin was in a completely different injury, but he missed the game the week before largely as a precaution. The decision was mostly taken because it didn't want to risk injuring him further because of the defensive injuries that Hearts already have. And then he didn't train at the start of the week, trained at the end of the week, and by the Friday, they were going to make a decision on the Saturday about whether he and Devlin were going to be in the squad or not. Neither of them made it. So I would expect him to be back for the next match, unless there's been some sort of setback in training or something like that. I am under the impression that he returned to training at the end of last week.
Yeah, so I would expect, like you, him and Devlin to be available for the Celtic game, which again is positive to have.
Devlin played in a bounce game, so
exactly.
that and unless there's like something happens again that we have no idea about, he will be in the matchday squad for Celtic Park.
And the other one was from Neil Block. Ask, where's Oda? Oda is here. He's been training. He's been training with the first team he played in the bounce game, but he is just not in Neil Critchley's plans at the moment, and I doubt he will be out in the plans going forward. We'll change up, and there was a couple of questions about the Aberdeen game coming up, and I mean this will be something we'll talk about in much more depth come the Aberdeen game. But Scott McIntosh asked, we've all seen firsthand what happens when a team play a narrow midfield diamond at Hampden, winky emoji, 2012 in brackets. Do we need to change our shape against Aberdeen, or do we continue with a formation that gets our best attacking options on the pitch? And likewise, Gorgie Opinion says, looking ahead to the Aberdeen game at Hampden, can you see Critchley changing the lineups to deal with their direct wide play? Hibs, St Mirren and Dundee games will look weak wide and conceded goals from crosses to the back post, usually our right to left. We have discussed, we've kind of touched on it a wee bit from time to time. I don't know about you, Craig, but I'm very much hopeful that we don't play the diamond at Hampden Park against Aberdeen. I like the diamond when we are at home against teams where we're going to dominate possession or we're going to win. Or we're expected to win, because not that we're not expected to beat Aberdeen, but you know what I mean. Because it gets more attacking players up the pitch, gets guys on who are good on the ball. Whereas I think in games at Celtic Park, games against Aberdeen at Hampden, I think need more balance.
Yeah, could possibly see a 4-2-3-1 or something like that. But then again, like what you say, you're instantly going a bit more. It feels like you're instantly going a bit more negative. It's going to be an interesting one. And then you're also, a big part of Hearts' attacking play recently has been getting Shankland on the ball, spinning, and then sending one of the runners through. And if you tweak that diamond, you take part of that away. And there's more space for that to happen for Hearts as well. So yes, it's all this sort of risk and reward thing, isn't it? We were talking about the size of the pitch the last time. I had a quick look. Can't really find official updated sources, but roughly Hampden is 75 yards wide, Tynecastle 70, and Pittodrie 72. So I was right a few weeks ago when I said that Pittodrie's on the sort of narrower side as well. But yeah, 5 yards between Tynecastle and Hampden feels quite significant. Some of those them varied. Like don't take this as gospel, because like I say, it was there was some where the sources were dated or not the most official or something like that. But that was the general idea I got. And also Hampden's like about 7 yards longer as well. So yeah, kind of goes back to the point that I was making there, that any tweak that they make away from that, because I don't know, you could go the 4-2. You can play the 4-2-4 slightly more reserved, I suppose. We have seen that happen, or at least the wingers getting back more than they did in the Boxing Day game against Hibs. The 4-2-3-1 would be the slightly more safer one, but then you are, again, with the 4-2-4 as well, you're taking away that front three. You're having to drop one of the front three, and that's probably largely why Critchley's gone to it. Devlin's dropped out, and it's getting another stronger player. I remember interviewing Ian Murray at the start of, not last season, but the season before, I think it was, and he was playing a 4-1-3-2, and I was asking him about it, and he said part of the reason was to get all his best players on the pitch. Now, I don't think he means that if 8 of his best players were forwards, he would play 8 forwards. I don't think it means that. I think it means that, like, well, why play a 5 out of 10 central midfielder just to play a certain shape when I can have another 7 out of 10 and play a slightly more attacking formation? And I think Critchley's employing a similar, there'll be a lot more nuances to it as well, but I think he might be employing a similar kind of philosophy there.
I would be looking for a comfort blanket in such a game, like seeing such a game. Like, this is why I'd be a manager who'd be labelled as boring and scared. Is that if I was setting up, I'd be like, right, first 2 names on the team sheet are Benny Beningame and Cammy Devlin, and like that you start from there and then you work your way out. And yeah,
if both those are available, I can't argue with that, though. I really can't argue with that. And that probably doesn't mean the diamond. Yeah,
exactly. So you could get away with playing both of them in the diamond, but again, I think it just doesn't quite work as well. And I've got a slight concern with the pace that Aberdeen can pose in wide areas with Keskinen and Shayden Morris. And it's not ideal because, as all Hearts fans know, as we've discussed, numerous times, there's not an abundance of high quality wide men, which makes it easier for Critchley to go, you know what, let's play 4-2-3-1, because even with Khartoum and Spittle playing as inverted wingers, I still don't fancy that against Aberdeen at Hampden. Again, I would be happy with that if we were playing Aberdeen at home. But Aberdeen at Hampden, I think, is just a different game. And again, speaking to Penrice for a piece next week, I asked him about the diamond shape, and he said for him it's taken a wee bit of getting used to, because all season he's just been bombing up and down the left. And you would think he would be asked to do more of that in the diamond. And he says on paper it looks like it, but no, absolutely not. He's been asked to be more mindful of when he goes forward, because when he goes forward, there's not someone directly in front of him to come in and cover him if they lose the ball. And Hearts have felt that they've been targeting behind Penrice a bit more because of the number of runs he makes up and down. But I do think in a 4-2-3-1 with Spittle in front of him, it does allow him to offer a wee bit more penetration, because I know fans have been going, he's not having as much of an influence recently, but that's because of a knock-on effect of the diamond and what he's been asked to do. And then it still opens the issue on the right-hand side, where who do you play on the right? And again, I just go back to the comfort blanket of Musa, and I just think he works really well defensively. I know it's not ideal, but these type of games, I always think you stay with you play an 11 who can stay in the game, can battle, and can work both sides of the ball, and then you can change it. You've got Vargas off the bench, you've got James Wilson off the bench, you've got Khartoum off the bench, so you got guys who can change it. Whereas, safety first approach and then go from there is how I would certainly approach the Aberdeen game.
4-2-3-1, just quickly to finish off. 4-2-3-1 also allows you to play. I would go with Khartoum rather than Musa, but it allows you to play, if you want, 3 playmakers rather than, you can play it without wingers, basically. A 4-2-3.
Yeah. I just like having in that formation having a runner, someone who can go.
I just like the idea of Khartoum at hand then.
Yeah. Well, no doubt we're both wrong, and it'll be something.
I know. We're always one player off, sometimes 2, but we're usually one player off for our predictions, and every now and again, unless he's sticking to the same shape every now and again, he'll throw in a curveball with the shape. And the semi-finals sometimes is a place where managers do that.
You have put a few, or we put a few questions in the star section on YouTube. This one fits in. So Daniel asked, were you two ever having serious doubts about Neil Critchley when it was that 2-2 collapse? And that feeds on to a question from Graham. I still see and hear a lot of criticism of Critchley and style of play. Some fans have said he isn't good enough for Hearts, and I just wonder your thoughts on Critchley and the job he is doing. So one question's a lot more serious than the other, but they're both asking essentially the same thing.
Yes. I wouldn't even say it was just Critchley. I think I was just having doubts about the whole thing after.
Doubts about life. That drive back from Dingwall was
exactly. There was 2 away games this season where it was the Aberdeen and Pittodrie was a similar feeling, because it was the amount Hearts put into that game, and they hadn't won a game domestically yet that season. And both those matches afterwards, I was just thinking, what do Hearts have to do to win a game this season? Not win a game this season but what the Hearts have to do to turn it around. I suppose it was at that point in the Ross County one. I don't know. I think I've always retained some confidence in Critchley. I definitely doubted myself at times, and that would have been one of those times. And not long before that as well, when there was just that whole period with Kilmarnock, Hibs, Petroclub. That was a sort of like testing time, I suppose, in my faith in it all again. But I don't know I ever had doubts in Critchley, but there was times where you were starting to think, is there something just kind of rotten here that's like not working, because it was 2 different managers and not just Critchley. Not that I have blind faith in him either, by the way. I mean, I want to stress that. I mean, that, like I say, there have been sometimes, and there have been things where I think he's got things wrong, but I think largely, to answer the second question, I think, yes, there is a sort of big game narrative, but I think there's too small a sample size. He's taken Hearts from too low a position. He's not had enough time to... on the training pitch. Time on the training pitch is something that he's just had recently. One transfer window he's had, it was a January one. Not had a pre-season with them. I think all these factors add up to the fact that he's got Hearts to where they are. I think that's all positive, and he deserves a chance going into next season. Kind of no questions asked for me. Like none of this big game stuff might change by the end of the season if Hearts lose against Aberdeen in the semi-final and a few other matches, but we'll wait and see. But yeah, at the moment, that's kind of how I'm feeling.
Yeah, there's some of the stuff you touched on there. There's a real contrast, because I do feel it's not unfair to make judgments and be wary, but I think it's unfair to just make sweeping assessments and go that he's no good, or etc., considering the situation he came into. I always have sympathy for managers coming into a job where the team have been struggling and they've come in midway through the season, or like into or the situation that Critchley found himself when he came in. Team were at the bottom of the league, and it was halfway between the two transfer windows, and we're just entering a period where we had a really intense schedule. I just look at, I know maybe some people have been probably getting, especially after the derby, getting fed up with it, but you look at the league table since he came in and you look at the league table since the turn of the year, and both are really positive, and both I've laid a foundation where our record against teams that are not Celtic, Rangers, Hibs and Aberdeen is exactly what you want in terms of just beating the rest, managing to beat the rest, or certainly not lose against the rest. That gives you a fantastic foundation platform for a season to build on. But at the same time, and it's like, so then don't want to then just like, 2 or 3 results should sway it. But there is that contrast where the more that narrative, the longer that narrative kind of sits there and builds, it does increase like the questions and the doubts. I can kind of get that, and it's for saying all this and the positive he's done and that he needs time. There's still 2 really potential big matches coming up for him in the potential derby if we get the confirmed top 6, and the semi-final, which are, I'm reluctant to say must wins, but they're really, really big games. Because
I just don't want to live in a world where he loses loses the next derby, I should say. I just don't want to live in that world.
Because we've seen it, the noise and the perception builds, and it puts them potentially losing those games, puts them on the back foot going into the summer. And rather than if you've won those games, then there's a real kind of positive momentum, and it kind of shuts down that noise, and it gives them a blank canvas and like a restart for the summer. So yeah, in terms of the job he's done, I think it's 7 out of 10. Just considering what he's come into and had to do,
and he has a clear way that he wants to play that, I don't know, I think most Hearts fans are happy with. So that's a thing. That's something as well. You don't always get that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll finish on two quick questions because I know you need to go.
Got a puppet show to get to.
You've got a puppet show to get to, so apologies if we've not got around to your question. So, but I'll finish on these 2. Stuart Moody asks, "Do you think we should go for a new number 1 in the summer?" Just a nice, easy question for you to finish. I
hadn't actually thought about this. I'm kind of swaying towards I have been swaying towards the opinion that Craig Gordon will retire at the end of the season. So let's just say that happens, right? I think that's what this question's assuming. I hadn't really thought. It's interesting because I hadn't really thought about it, and I'd be perfectly happy with Xander Clark going into next season as the Hearts number 1. But it's very interesting because Hearts would then go out and you would assume go and look for another goalkeeper. But then, are you looking for your quintessential backup goalkeeper, or are you looking for another number 1? Are you looking for somebody to potentially either to keep Xander Clark on his toes or to come in and instantly like have a debate about who's going to be the number 1 going into the season? I'm not sure what the thinking is going into the summer. The whole Xander Clark one's strange because it makes it even more difficult to gauge, given that Xander Clark isn't and hasn't played much football at all this season. In fact, I mean, he hasn't played this season other than two league matches. Is that right?
Yes, he played the first 2 games of the season. He played the first 2 games of the season. Will I answer this question properly? I'm reluctant to go into another season where it's like, who's our number 1 between Xander Clark and Craig Gordon? I just don't. I don't think it's healthy. I think I would be happy with Xander Clark as number 1 next season, and potentially one of the younger goalkeepers stepping up, whether it's Harry Stone or Liam McFarlane, to potentially be the number 2. Brian Fulton's still contracted. And then I think it's you give that see how that goes. And again, I just think you look around. I did a podcast yesterday about Scottish Premiership goalkeepers. There's not a lot of high quality goalkeepers in the Scottish Premiership. What you're looking for is a dependable, reliable, solid goalkeeper who is not going to make mistakes and who is strong shot stopper. And I think you've got that in Xander Clark. Say you've got it in Craig Gordon as well. But yeah, I think I don't think what I'll say is I don't think it's going to be a priority in the summer. As a new number one goalkeeper. I think there's other areas of the team that require that. And finally, just because it's timely, William Harding, in brackets, Liam, asks your thoughts on Czar of Hearts. Looking forward to the Vlad interview out tomorrow. Have you listened to the Mulgrew?
Yeah, I caught up. I was 2 behind and caught up on my way to last weekend's game.
Yes.
It's excellent. Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's so well put together. It's really well researched. The selection of talking heads, how it's been edited and serialized and things. It's all like a very, very expertly put together piece of work.
It's brilliant. Yeah,
thoroughly. Look, the way they've ended it as well is great as well, because they kept it all quiet, and then at the end of the episode, it was. And we probably spoiled the surprise for a few people by putting the article out for it, but we were promoting it, and it's deserves to be promoted. But the surprise of them and them keeping it under their hats of Vladimir Romanov at the end and just making it a whole bonus episode is a genius idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that is the people behind Czar of Hearts did get in touch with me to ask about doing an article on it. So it wasn't as if we were doing any big surprise. But even though I knew it was coming, it was still a buzz right at the end of that, podcast. And everything you said, the way it's been put together, the format of it has been absolutely brilliant. It's been.
The picture of him waving already.
Yes, iconic. Yeah, I think there's a few Hearts fans have already got it as their profile picture. Now, I've been vocal on this in the past, been very much in the pro Romanov camp. It's definitely listened to it back. There's been elements where it's not completely changed my opinion, but it's certainly. Had me asking questions, just more the frustration aspect, especially in the first few episodes, where I'm just thinking, if you just left it alone for one damn season, we could have
continued to sing your name.
Yeah. So, but no, it's been fantastic, and obviously we lived through it, and I think a lot of fans, a lot of football fans who are not Hearts fans have really enjoyed it, because while they've probably heard bits and bobs, they probably don't get the full picture. But to have it broken down and to hear some of the stories, to hear some of the players or people involved, and how much they almost enjoyed it, but went through was great to hear. And yeah, so it's a period of Hearts I wouldn't swap for the world, and I would probably happily go through again, knowing that Hearts come out fan owned, etc. But yeah, I think I would recommend the podcast to everyone, and definitely be listening to the Romanov one, and I'll probably put something on the site tomorrow, kind of just what we learned from it, kind of just breaking it down without giving away absolutely everything. But it's the first time he's spoken in more than a decade. So fascinating. Reckon some of the stuff's going to be absolutely nonsensical, but enjoyable nonetheless.
Yeah, he's going to be asked directly questions about team selection and things like that. So it'll be interesting.
And Vladimir Putin.
I know. So it'll be interesting to see whether he even answers questions like that, because I'm sure there'll be a couple he'll completely dodge. He dodged.
Yeah.
Did he not allegedly dodge a court case because of or he actually did not turn up for court because of a heart condition or something like that, didn't he?
Potentially, you can't rule anything out with Robert. But
I was going to say, like, you need to worry about lawyers, but I don't think you can really slander. I don't think you can really defame Vladimir Romanov.
He, because there was always a chat about him being in a submarine, and then the picture came up, and it just looked like he was in an IKEA showroom. But yeah, looking forward to that. We will end there because I know you need to get away, and I'll try and keep in a note of the questions we didn't ask, and we'll come back to them at a later date. When we'll be back, I'm not too sure, because this is my last video before I head off on holiday, as long as my flights are fine. But I'm sure we'll be back soon enough. Hope everyone has a lovely weekend, and be sure to check out heartstandard.co.uk. Won't be loads of stuff going on up over the weekend, because we're having some time off, but there's a back catalogue there that you can enjoy. But until the next time, goodbye.